Okay, so for your assignment, you need to do something called a climograph, which means we need to understand what a climograph is, but we then first need to understand what is climate. So let's have a quick chat, the difference between weather and climate. So the weather is what you got told the temperature was going to be today, what the wind is going to be for today, whether or not it's going to rain today. Climate is something that is done over a long, long time. So you can see here on the slide, the first image on blue is weather, because it gives us the symbols that they use on the weather apps that we all have about what the weather's going to be today, tomorrow, and probably for the rest of the week. But the one below tells us what the climate is. It's actually trends of rainfall and temperature over time that gives an indication of whether a place is hot or cold. So you can see here in the representation of colour, the various temperatures of the world basically over time. But that's climate because it's over time. This is a more detailed map of climate. A long time ago there was a dude called Köppen who came up with a way of measuring climate across the world and representing it in what we call a thematic map. If you remember back to our other videos, it's thematic because it's colour coded. And you can see here that there are various different colours representing different climates. A bit later along, a guy called Geiger came along and made it more detailed and actually provided codes for various parts of the world in relation to what climate is. So I'm going to show you how that works. So you'll see here along the bottom, it tells us what each of the colours represent. And if we look over here at Canberra, it's kind of a green colour. And so if I look down here, that kind of pale green colour is CWA. So it's giving me a code. So now if I go to this one, it tells me that C means it's temperate, W means I've got a dry winter, and A means I've got a hot summer. So if we look down this, we've got tropical, arid, temperate, continental, and polar. These are terminologies that are used to describe different types of climate. So if you remember when we talked about the Tropic of Cancer and the Tropic of Capricorn, that's your tropical areas. So that says A. So if we go back here and we look at the A's, we can see that, yep, it's lying in the tropical area. It's lying between the two tropics. So that's that blue bit. If we look down here at the code, you can see that the A's are in blue, and you can see that they lie across the equator and between the tropics. So that's not unexpected. Then you can see here arid. Arid refers to desert. So if we go back to our other map and we look at the B's, you can see here that that's the middle of Australia. That's definitely arid there because it's desert. All right. Temperate means that it's kind of a moderate, wet and dry, hot and dry and wet as well. And continental is a different type of, sort of similar in temperate, but it does slightly different things. And then you can see here that you've got polar, and the polar is obviously the ice caps. So here you can look at different codes, and then you can go back to the other one and have a look at different areas and see whether they've got hot and cold and dry winters. Okay, so it actually did identified ways of climate and what to expect in relation to those areas around the world. Of course, when we're talking about climate, we do have to talk about climate change. The climate has always been changing on the globe for various reasons. You know, we used to have dinosaurs, we don't have dinosaurs anymore. If you remember back to first semester when we talked about how humans moved around the earth, there were ice ages, and that created ice bridges so people could actually move more readily around the earth. We've also had many ice ages in the 1900s. So climate is always changing and things are always different. There's lots of discussion today about climate change and discussion of whether or not there is man-made causes in relation to climate change. And there is a debate and discussion around this. And it's something that you should be conscious of for your assignment in relation to sustainability. Because there are things that we do and we could be doing that actually impact the climate, i.e. the long-term weather patterns. But what does all this mean for your assignment? Well, it means that you have to make a climograph, and a climograph is a way of graphing and showing in visually the average temperature each month, the average maximum temperature, the average minimum temperature, and average rainfall. So you need to have all four of these pieces of information in one graph. Okay, so instead of it just being a bar chart or a line chart or a pie chart, It actually has to have a range of information on it, which means that it gets very, very complicated, because it means the x-axis, which shows the months, and the y-axis will show rainfall and temperature. I'm assuming you've done x and y axes in maths. If you haven't, we can have a talk about it in class. But you're going to have two different representations of numbers. So what does this actually look like? Well, here's an example. So if you look to the left of that graph, you can see it says air temperature, and to the right it has rainfall, so that different axes have got different information on them. All right, and then of course the x-axis has got the months. So the y-axis has got two lots of information, and the x-axis has got the months. All right, so the bar chart, the bars there, so the solid lines, that's what we call a bar chart. That is measured against the rainfall, because that tells us when things are raining, and the lines tell us the temperature, and then we would look to the left-hand side to measure that. I know it's complicated and you're going to be making one in class, but what you need to understand is that the lines are measured against the left and the rainfall is measured against the right. So we've got two lots of information in one graph. We'll be talking about it in class, but I need you to understand that it's going to be complicated and there's lots of information in one graph. But we do this because it makes it really easy to give us information. So I can see that July, they get most of their rainfall and that it's their hottest time, so obviously that's when summer is. Clearly this is a country in the northern hemisphere, not in the southern hemisphere, because they've got their summer in July. I can also see here that they get very little rainfall in January and December, but it's also very cold. So if I was going to build an amusement park in this city, I would be focusing on making sure I get people in the warmer months. However, that's when it rains the most. So I'd be thinking very carefully about making sure that walkways were under cover, so that when people are queuing for their rides, they're not getting wet. Okay, they can get wet while they're on the rides because they're having fun maybe, but I'd be very conscious of the amount of rain that falls during those months, but that's when I might be targeting them. Of course, what I might decide is that, well, if I make my theme park or my amusement or my water park about cooler aspects, then I could focus on sort of, you know, March, April, May, and October and November as months for me to operate, because then I could operate at lower temperatures and not have the rain. So you can see here I can interpret a lot of information from this graph in relation to what I need to do and then apply it to my amusement park.